Good morning, good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Johanna. I'm from the UN Innovation Network. Welcome to the last part of our mini-series on the UN Innovation Toolkit. Over the past months, we've been exploring a different tool of the Innovation Toolkit every other week, and today is our last session, unfortunately, on the evaluation model. And the toolkit is, of course, a resource that was developed upon request by the Secretary General and is a resource designed to meet the needs of UN colleagues and designed with UN colleagues from across the system to help colleagues introduce more innovation into their work. And those of you who have joined before, you will know that we have the 5 space modules: strategy, partnerships, architecture, culture, and evaluation, focus of our discussion today. And each of them is critical to promoting innovation in organizations. So today we're diving deeper into this last module. If you missed any of the previous ones, they are all recorded, and all the slides and recordings are shared in our webinar library and on our YouTube channel, and we'll also share them with you afterwards. So as we've done for the past couple of months, we'll do a short presentation, introduce you to the toolkit overall, and then let you, or to the module overall more like it, and then let you pick which tool you'd like to dive deeper in. You're welcome to ask any kind of questions that you have. We use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen for that. Help us prioritize questions by voting on them, and we'll try and give you the floor to ask questions yourself as much as possible. And as I already mentioned, the webinar is being recorded. Tends to be our most popular question. I like to hit it out at the beginning. And with that, my great pleasure to once again welcome Paula to us. Paula de Blas Gonzalez, she's an associate fellow at the UN Systems Staff College, and she's in charge of supporting entities in using the toolkit and scaling it out. So Paula lives and breathes the toolkit. Few people, I think, who know it better than her. Thanks for joining us again, Paula. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, Johanna. It is a pleasure to be here once again with you in this last webinar, unfortunately, of the UN Innovation Toolkit webinar series. It has been a pleasure so far, and looking forward to this session on evaluation, as Johanna has kindly shared. As in any other webinar that we have conducted so far, we would like to begin by asking this question. Did you join any of our UN Innovation Toolkit webinars so far? This question is in order to determine how far we need to go in the recap of the UN Innovation Toolkit as a whole before we actually get into the evaluation model. I see that 21 have answered already. And let's show the results. And the results are that 57% of you have joined at least one previous webinar on the UN Innovation Toolkit series. That is great news. We will get into a brief recap then on this UN Innovation Toolkit webinar. And let's firstly begin by introducing a key feature of this UN Innovation Toolkit. It's diagnostic. This diagnostic, whenever you first log into the toolkit, we encourage you to undertake this diagnostic, as is a first option to start scoping and to start utilizing the toolkit, which is comprehensive and has a lot of different options. So we recommend you to start by this option. And this diagnostic has 27 questions that evaluates your readiness to innovate and gives you a specific innovation profile and detailed results of that profile. In these detailed results, you can see both your strengths and the areas of improvement. And why I was saying that is a first option to start scoping the use of the toolkit, because it also gives you, based on your results, 5 recommended tools out of the 21. We will really quickly show you how this toolkit, this diagnostic can be done. First of all, you have to use the perspective you want to answer the questions from your team, unit, organization. If it's a team level type of discussions where you want to evaluate your readiness to innovate, then you would choose team, and the same with unit, and the same with organization. Well, an example of the type of questions you will have. My team knows what resources and capabilities we need to achieve our goals. Well, after a discussion with my team, I believe that I agree with this statement. Second question, my team has a clearly defined set of goals for innovation. Perhaps not so much. Well, and in this sense, you're encouraged to have discussions in each of these questions with your team, with your unit, and ultimately with your organization. So you can actually assess and evaluate your innovation readiness, as well as to get this innovation profile. In this randomly answered questionnaire, I am a motivator. And after you have your profile, you also have a description of this profile. Motivators, for instance, are strongest at developing an innovative culture. And you can also explore further that specific profile, reading the typical strengths as well as the biggest risks of this profile, and having further guidance on how and next steps after conducting this assessment. You are also provided with detailed results. I think this is a really comprehensive type of results that you're given based on your responses. And these results are organized throughout the SPACE framework: the strategy, partnerships, architecture, culture, and evaluation models. So you are basically assessed on the 5 critical pillars to innovate, and you're given scores in each of them, and of course a justification of those scores. So for instance, my randomly answered profile is strong in the culture for innovation. However, I would need to focus a bit more on my evaluation, and it's good because we are actually in the evaluation webinar today, so we will explore further the tools and the evaluation pillar for innovation. And after that, you're also provided with 5 recommended tools. So as already said, you are able to start scoping interventions based on the results of your assessment. Well, now let's continue with the recap of the toolkit. Here we can see the big picture of what the UN Innovation Toolkit is. We have already seen what the diagnostic is and how it works. The SPACE framework with the 5 critical pillars for innovation. And it forms the SPACE acronym, and that is why we have all these rockets and all these figures around. And today we will focus on the evaluation model, which has 4 UN derived tools out of the 21 tools that we have in this toolkit. And each tool is a composition of step-by-step directions, worksheets, and UN case studies in order for you to be able to contextualize. Also, we want to share with you this QR code that you can scan with your phone, or the link for the toolkit in case you want to navigate with us through the toolkit in this session. And we also want to remind you that you have this UN System Staff College free course. This free course is Introduction to Innovation. It's an absolutely free course to all UN staff. And here you can find critical concepts, practices, and it's linked to the UN Innovation Toolkit. So please feel free, of course, to research it in your browser or to scan it with your phone. And now let's get into the evaluation model of the toolkit. The evaluation model, as already explained, is the 5 critical pillars to innovate. Evaluation is, as said, fundamental to actually justify certain investments to see what is working, to see what should be improved, as well as to communicate success to the relevant stakeholder and to the decision-making bodies. So evaluation for innovation is critical, and we also acknowledge that regarding innovation, innovation is a dynamic and interactive process, and as such, we acknowledge that to evaluate these processes can be challenging. However, there is great value in incorporating these evaluation frameworks, as it can help you to identify opportunities regarding areas of improvement, to allocate resources more efficiently and based on these areas of improvement identified, as well as to demonstrate value to decision makers, as already expressed. And what will you find in this evaluation model in the UN Innovation Toolkit? Well, there are 4 main parts that the toolkit will support you with. The first one is to assess your enabling environment for innovation, to see if you are in a team, unit, or organization that enables innovation, or if there are certain barriers for that to happen. Also, to understand which of the innovation projects is having the desired impact, and to determine with a set criteria as well as indicators how is the project going. Also, to analyze the health of the pipeline of projects across the innovation life cycle. And finally, equally important, to communicate effectively the results of these evaluations. There are 4 UN-derived tools, as already expressed, and now we are going to briefly explain the 4 of them to you all, and then you will be able to decide in which tool you would like to focus on today. The first tool we will briefly introduce is the innovation storytelling. I have to say that this is a really popular tool within the UN with a lot of downloads and good ranking. And this tool supports all users to construct a cohesive story for their innovation efforts, as well as to identify the different audiences for the story and the unique characteristics of that audiences, as well as to select the proper methods and channels in order to communicate the story. Ultimately, this tool will support you to create a compelling story that both inspires and also gives a call to action to the selected audience. What are the objectives of the innovation storytelling tool? First of all, to tell your organization, unit, team innovation story in a way that resonates with target audiences, that also brings attention to the innovation idea or process that you're involved in, as well as to capture sustained interest. The second objective, really related with this one, is to increase stakeholder support, which is always critical, buy-in, excitement about the innovation activities you are involved in, through the understanding and the communication of value, success, and relevance of the activity you are performing. Before you begin, you have, as always, recommendations. And the recommendation here is to identify an innovation project or initiative that is being conducted by your team, unit, organization that would benefit from an improved communication with the stakeholders. After this, you will then go through 4 different steps. The first step is to develop a compelling theme for your story. That is to say, a goal for conclusion, a goal for a sentiment, in order to transmit that to the audience. Then, to identify your audience and its unique characteristics, taking into account their needs, their interests, their preferences. Then, to choose the appropriate storytelling method and channel. And finally, to determine the frequency of communication, which is, of course, crucial and depends on the specific project that you're involved in. We have the case study from UNICEF in this case, an organization that tells the stories of innovation to garner support, buy-in, and excitement. The second tool is the stage gate assessment. This tool, I personally really appreciate this tool as it gives support in order to determine specific indicators, specific methods to evaluate an individual project throughout its life cycle. And this specific tool supports to both select and apply criteria to inform go and non-go decisions. And the objectives of this tool is to make decisions about whether to advance specific ideas to the next stage of development with the innovation life cycle. The innovation life cycle is the ideation, incubation, pilot, and scale phases. Also, another objective is to allocate resources to innovation projects more effectively and efficiently based on areas of improvement identified, as well as to examine and compare projects in a specific stage of development against a common set of criteria. Before you begin, the recommendations here is to have 2 or more innovation projects in the same development stage. This is just if you are intending to compare different projects. Another suggestion is to determine whether or not any criteria exist to evaluate innovation projects within your team, unit, organization. And finally, to consider your innovation priorities, what success looks like for your team, unit, or organization. The steps that you will then take is to firstly develop. The first step is actually critical, is where you have to develop your decision criteria for each stage, as well as the point system to evaluate each criteria. The second step is to score the projects and each criteria based on the point system that you have decided in the previous stage. And finally, to further examine ideas, the scores, and why you have given them these good or bad scores in order to have lessons learned and to determine next steps. And actually, non-go decisions are huge. They give really good opportunities to learn and to have lessons learned for the future. And now let's go to the next tool, the third tool of this evaluation module, that is the life cycle analysis. The life cycle analysis is a tool that supports users to identify bottlenecks in the innovation processes across the innovation life cycle, as well as to develop strategies in order to address these challenges, these bottlenecks. And it supports you to assess both in the whole innovation life cycle and specific stages of the innovation life cycle to assess and to see these challenges already mentioned. Therefore, it has 2 main objectives. The first objective of this tool is to monitor the development of projects, to identify barriers in the innovation process and make necessary and needed adjustments. The second objective is to identify strategies to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of project development from one stage to the next stage. Let's remember that the stages are incubation, ideation, pilot, and scale. And before you begin, again, recommendations. The recommendations here is to have at least 6 innovation projects in your innovation pipeline in order to be able to assess them in a comprehensive manner and to compare them. Also, another recommendation is to consider conducting this exercise with at least some management level staff. So this will bring a different perspective to this assessment, not just the project specific perspective, and this can bring further insights and results. Then you will have 4 main steps once you start using this tool. The first step is to make a list of your innovation projects. As already said, minimum 6 innovation projects is the recommendation. Then you're encouraged to analyze the number and ratio of projects by each stage of the innovation lifecycle. After which you will be also encouraged to analyze the projects within one particular stage of interest, and after that you will analyze the innovation lifecycle holistically. So these are the 4 steps that you will take with this tool, the lifecycle analysis tool. And here's another example and case study of the contextualization of the life cycle analysis tool by UNICEF, who actually employed the life cycle analysis principles when transitioning pilot projects to scale. And the last tool of this evaluation model is the enabling environment scan. This tool is critical in order to evaluate, to assess the staff perceptions regarding innovation in regards to culture, architecture, and partnerships. This is done through surveys, and this tool ultimately supports you to evaluate how effective is your organizational architecture, culture, and partnerships in enabling innovation, or if you're facing organizational barriers or organizational constraints. Therefore, this tool has these 2 objectives. The first one is to pinpoint organizational barriers to innovation, and then to also measure progress in creating an environment to foster innovation over time. Before you begin, you are encouraged to consider which elements of your innovation environment you wish to explore further, and then to plan to solicit feedback from members of your team, unit, organization who bring different and diverse perspectives. That is to say, to take into account different levels of seniority, gender, location. And then you will go through 4 different steps. This is the first step is to download the survey or the surveys and to identify the right participants across the team, across the unit, and across the organization, the target of your specific survey. And then you are encouraged to collect and score the surveys, after which you will have to sum up scores for all participants. That is to say, to rank factors based on the scores from greatest area of strength to weakness. And finally, analyze and circulate the results. As already explained through this webinar series, to communicate and to share these results is as equally important, and that is why we have the innovation storytelling tool in this evaluation model. Well, and now we want to share with you the 2 most popular tools of the evaluation model, innovation storytelling, as well as stage gate assessment. And here we are entering into an exciting part of the webinar, that is when you actually decide where we will go. Thanks, Johanna. Johanna has just shared with us the poll where you can actually vote.
What is your gut feel, Paula?
I wish we would go for state gate assessment. However, I acknowledge that innovation storytelling is highly popular. So I'm guessing innovation storytelling.
And I think you have guessed right, which makes it 5 out of 5 that you and Baron have guessed right where we're going. So ending the poll here, here's your results.
70% of you want to go to innovation storytelling. Okay, let's go then.
Paula, before we go there, can I throw one question that I see in the Q&A box at you? And there's a colleague who's wondering whether the toolkit, and specifically this module, will actually help design the evaluation criteria for projects. So I think in the stage gate tool, you mentioned that one needs to assess against predefined criteria, but does it actually help with designing those?
Exactly. Actually, that tool gives you, for example, when you actually try to evaluate each stage of a project, in that tool you are given certain examples and certain criteria and certain key performance indicators that you can implement in all the stages. Because of course, each criteria, each key performance indicator will vary a lot from stage to stage. But my honest suggestion is that each project will have a really certain specifics that will need different criteria and different KPIs. So that would be my answer to that.
Thanks so much, Paula. Makes perfect sense. And back to storytelling.
Okay. Well, just to add, I of course recommend you to use the state gauge assessment tool to determine these indicators, even if we don't get into it today. And let's go to innovation storytelling. Okay, as already expressed, this innovation storytelling is in order to support the construction, the creation of a cohesive story. For your innovation efforts, for your to share also the results of your innovation impact. As already said, communication is crucial to have everyone on board and to gain buy-in. And let's then pass with the first step of this innovation storytelling tool. The first step is to develop a compelling theme for your story. What does this mean? To actually set and select the central objective that the whole story will be formed from. This central objective for your communication is, we actually encourage you to ask yourselves, your team, your unit, this question. What is the sentiment or the conclusion that the audience should ultimately walk away with? And from this question will highly support the creation of this central objective. Also, when thinking about this central objective, we recommend to focus on impact, of course, on the results, the potential results, or the results that the activity has had. Also, to draw upon emotion, which brings, of course, higher attention and buy-in from participants in general. And to also show how your project, your activity, your initiative is different from others. What is the value added of your activity? And also there's further suggestions in useful ways in how to frame your story. For example, it's always actually really useful to highlight the partner successes when you share this story, to create vignettes, to promote persistence in these innovation processes. And there's like a lot of different other suggestions that you can find in the tool when creating this central objective. Here we have a worksheet. The worksheet will be available to all of you in the UN Innovation Toolkit in this specific tool. And as you can see in this first step, you are encouraged to fill the space of objective, the space of key points, and the space of supporting points of interest. In the space of objective, you are encouraged to clearly describe what you are hoping to achieve through this communication. Then the key points is to describe how your story will flow to support your communications objective. And then the supporting points of interest is to bring data points, to bring key figures that support the key points and ultimately the objective described above. And then in the step 2, we will focus in the empty part of this worksheet. This step 2 is to identify your audience and its unique characteristics. The first step is to identify the category of the stakeholder, as they normally fall within one of 5 different categories. Perhaps it's part of the leadership that you want to reach out, their colleagues, their partners you can have both internal and external partners, perhaps the beneficiaries, or naysayers, people that may be a bit more difficult to bring into these innovation processes and initiatives. After you actually have selected or identified the category of the stakeholder, then you're encouraged to consider the unique characteristics of the particular audience. So, for instance, here you can find some questions, and you can find even further questions in the tool. And some questions may be like, what is the seniority level of the stakeholder? Does the team have regular engagement with the stakeholders in an informal way? Level of engagement actually of this audience with the project that you are showing. Is this audience data-driven, story-driven, in a general age range, or are there like any structural constraints that we have to take into account when telling this story, for instance, technology-wise? Well, these are just some key questions that they are really useful in order to consider the unique characteristics that your audience may have. And once you have already selected both, you will be encouraged to fill out the worksheet. That, as you can see, it's a zoom in of the last worksheets that we have shown you. In this worksheet, you can find the list of stakeholders, the audience characteristics, and their organizational response. List of stakeholders. Of course, here is where you actually specify the different audiences that you are targeting. In the audience characteristics, you're encouraged to briefly describe the key characteristics of the stakeholder, of the specific one. And in the organizational response, based on the characteristics of that stakeholders, you're encouraged to briefly describe how your story will be tailored and to select a strategy to adopt to best resonate with that specific group. So here we can contextualize how this is done. And for example, let's focus on the first point, that is potential donors. And for potential donors in audience characteristics, they have expressed that they mostly consist of governments and member states with varying levels of familiarity with the issue. Then the organizational response is that they need to express basic knowledge of the issue due to these varying levels of familiarity with it. And that visual immersive experiences would be highly useful, as they are universal and will be compelling. So as you can see, they have addressed the stakeholder, its characteristic, and created a response accordingly, a communication response. And now let's go to the step 3. The step 3 is to select the appropriate method and channel, based, of course, on the communication that we have from the audience, from the previous steps. And the method represents the format of the communication, and the channel is how your story is going to be distributed. Well, methods, we have several of them. Here are some examples that the tool gives you. For instance, infographics, comics, illustrations, article or blogs, writing reports, videos, meeting presentations, immersive experiences. And here you can also have a description of the strengths of each of them and when to use them. And of course, with a case study to contextualize the use of each method. And then the channels. The channels, there are many channels, as you may know, and these are some of them. For instance, social media may have some high buy-in for the specific audiences. However, for others, intranet or wiki may be better. And in some cases, physical materials are really engaging. Therefore, these are just 3 different types that you can select. But of course, if you are performing a presentation, the channel will be different. And the last step before you actually launch this innovation storytelling is to determine the frequency of communication. Basically, you need to decide how often to update your stories and produce new content. And here we want to actually share some data with you from UN innovative organizations. And we are going to show to express the 2 biggest percentages in the frequency of communications with their stakeholders. And nearly 40% provide updates in a monthly basis. And the other 30% provide quarterly updates. This is just some examples, but of course, this varies and depends a lot on your specific needs and the pace of change of your project. For instance, the more quickly changes take place, the more there is to discuss within a shorter time span and to update. And with this, this is the end of today's session, the last session of this webinar series that comes to an end. So I really thank you all. It has been a pleasure to have been with all of you in this learning journey. And thank you, Johanna and Junin, for this opportunity.
Joining us so regularly and sharing these tools. I am constantly impressed by the knowledge that you have of each of them. There are, I think, 21 tools. They are quite detailed. You see, there's a lot of worksheets, there's a lot of content. So I am really very impressed by your knowledge of it and how well you presented and introduced it. So colleagues, if you have a question, please put in the Q&A box. Paula, I have one for you. Anonymous user is wondering, why is communication part of evaluation?
Of course, this is actually a really normal and frequent question that we have. So thank you very much for asking it. And communication is part of the evaluation because once we have the results, the evaluations, the assessments done with all the conclusions, there is equally important to be able to communicate those results effectively in order to gain buy-in, interest, to be able to communicate effectively with decision makers, with your leadership, or even with your beneficiaries. So it is indeed not the evaluation per se with indicators with that type of typology, but it is because it's as well needed to transmit, to communicate, and to share the results. So it's part of it, basically. I'm not sure if Johanna has further insights.
No, definitely not further insights. I very much agree. I really like the tool actually and the focus on tailoring communication to audiences. And I can't tell you how often I see in the UN that we, and I recently saw an event advertised, and I'm picking a random SDG, but it was like, join us for the launch of the SDG 7.8 report. And I was like, I work on the SDGs, but I don't know what 7.8 is. How do we expect colleagues like from member states to know what, the goal 7 and the indicator 8 is? We need to think more about our audience and pick them up where they are and bring them along. So fully agree. And I think it definitely needs to be part of that. Andres, let's bring you in. You have a question. I'm allowing you to talk. So if you want to take the floor, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. The question I got, and thanks for the floor, is how to embrace storytelling in innovation projects, but that are not intended for external audiences, not for the government, not for implementation projects, but internal. How to improve that in internal projects, internal innovation projects, for example. Thanks.
Of course, this is actually equally important, and the first step of this tool, if you want to actually put it in practice, is the selection of the audience. This audience can be internal, of course, and regarding like if it's within your own unit or if it's a totally different unit, the strategy may vary, of course, because they may have different levels of knowledge about the topic and different type of characteristics that you're encouraged to take into account when creating this storytelling. So this tool works perfectly for internal use as well, and it's actually really helpful to create a better communication within departments, within teams, and to break that potential silos that there may be. And
if I can add, I think part of breaking those silos is also, again, changing the way we talk and the language of innovation. So we shouldn't be using all those buzzwords that exist around. And, you know, again, acronyms, things like that, making it easy and making it compelling. I always find that sticking to a very clear storyline, you know, what was the problem? What did we do about it? What is achieved? People understand that no matter what context that it is, it's not very innovative. But if we follow a simple and clear structure, then communicating about innovation actually becomes much more tangible to colleagues all around. So that would be my 2 cents worth on that. Andres, I hope we answered the question. It's a good one. But like Paula said, the tool is designed to cater to different audiences, be they internal and external, and think for a strategy on those. Okay, great. I think, Paula, always a good sign when we're out of questions, because it means a presentation well done. So I want to say thank you for joining us. And it has been, thank you. It has been such a pleasure. Do you want to share maybe one word or sentence or two about what's happening next with the tool? Do you have any plans to develop it further, or how can colleagues who want to use it more, what should they do? Can they get in touch with you?
Of course. Actually, please feel free to. I will actually put my email there in case any of you are interested, as we are developing many different initiatives in order to support the rollout of the toolkit and its integration into UN entities to support you in this disruptive journey of innovation. And we are currently developing an e-learning module that will be free to all of you, that is based on the SPACE framework. And we are also conducting different initiatives such as mentoring partnerships, such as a research program to actually improve the toolkit, to iterate the toolkit based on your feedback, and other initiatives such as learning and innovation strategies, where in order to support this integration through webinars and through different activities based on your specific situation. So of course, please feel free to I will put here the email of the UN Systems Staff College.
Sounds like you have exciting plans, and also sounds like you're not going to be bored anytime soon. So
it doesn't seem like, but thank you very much once again for this opportunity. It has been a pleasure, Johanna. And also thank you to all the participants that have joined throughout these webinars, that I believe that it has been already almost 3 months of webinars. So thank you very much to all of you.
Indeed. Thanks to all of you. A big thank you to you again, Paula. Greetings to Baron. Thanks to him as well. And yeah, please keep using the toolkit, share your feedback, and let's continue to develop this resource together. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. See you very soon. Bye-bye.